Hi guys, I'm Wiko. Today on Dungeon Guide, Static's going to be covering my favorite, Veteran Hard Mode Imperial City Prison.
Thanks, Wiko, and welcome everyone to ICP. This is one of my favorite dungeons as well. Not just because of the diversity of the mobs, but also because of the cool and interesting boss fights. The most notable enemy in the regular mobs are these berserkers. They can cloak and use other Nightblade abilities, and just have the largest health pool out of any of the mobs. The first thing I want to point out is the location of this large portal in this room. It's going to be a factor later on in the fight. A large misconception with this fight is that you have to burn quickly. You actually want to damage this boss slower. If you burn him too quickly, all of the adds show up as they are based on HP percentages and you'll get overrun. His first attack is his most deadly. It's this conal, he claws at you, and if you point that at the wrong party member, they are going to die quickly. As the tank, you're going to want to be blocking this attack and also always be wary which direction you're pointing it. His jump attack is his heavy attack. Not a big deal, just block it. This next attack places circles around two party members. If you stand in the outer lip when it explodes, you get stunned. If you stay on the inside of those circles, you won't get damaged. Notice how little our DPS is focusing on the boss. They're really focusing down the adds, and that is the correct move. You do not want to be caught with too many adds up. It's really easy to get overrun in this fight. So take your time. Have your tank pull the boss off to the side away from the group and let your DPS focus on the adds. When they're all down, focus back on the boss until the next HP percentage where the adds appear again. It's counterintuitive. I know you want to pour damage on this boss, but don't. It's much safer this way. I let aggro drop on this boss for 1 second and watch just how quickly my DPS gets nuked here. This shows just how deadly that conal attack really is. Around 50% HP, the boss will exclaim, "Lord Warden, aid me!" Thanks for that spot-on impersonation, Wiko. This signifies the arrival of this harvester out of that portal. Your tank needs to point the boss and the harvester away from the group as they both have conals, though the harvester's is interruptible. Your tank will get stunned when she sends out these feast balls, so break free. If these balls make it to her, she gets a big heal, so either burn her down or burn them down before they reach her. It's imperative when this harvester arrives that the DPS drops what they're doing and just focuses on burning her down. If your group had been focusing adds prior to this should be no problem. However, if you had been letting the adds pile up, when the harvester shows up, it could be deadly to your group. So make sure you focus the adds, not the boss, until the harvester shows up, drop ultimates on that harvester, burn her down quickly, then go back to clearing adds and finishing the boss off. Here's a unique mechanic in the mobs of this dungeon. These flesh atronachs, after being alive for so long, will become enraged and they will start one-shotting party members. I'm talking like 90,000 damage light attacks. Higher DPS groups never see this mechanic, but if you know you're in a lower DPS group, it might be a good idea to really focus these atronachs first, as if you don't, you run the risk of them becoming enraged. Down this long hallway, we're introduced to the first Watcher. This AoE is a knockback, so make sure you block or dodge roll it. Also, these green beams will stun you if you don't block when they hit you. Unlike Watchers in other dungeons, this one will always summon 2 adds. These will be the adds that use Nightblade mechanics and also have larger HP pools. This boss fight is a fun one. The first thing that needs mentioning is this pool in the middle of the room is poison, so don't stand in that. The other mechanic of this poison pool is if the prisoners make it down into there, they will dissolve and then become a flesh atronach, as you see on the far side of the room here. These atronachs also possess the enrage timer, so burn them down quickly. The boss has heavy knockback attacks, randomly targeted conals, and this execute. He'll run to a player, knock them down, and you have to interrupt him or he will execute that player. Now comes the fun part. When the boss goes to the middle of the room, he is no longer damageable. You'll notice as you finish off the flesh atronach, these little piles of poo growing all over the room. These are used with your synergy button to disintegrate the prisoners from the cages trying to reach that pool in the middle of the room. If you ignore this mechanic, you're about to have a lot of flesh atronachs up, and you do not want that. So release your inner monkey here and start flinging some poo. The boss will become active and damageable before this poo flinging phase is completed. So your tank needs to stop flinging poo early and grab the boss and any atronachs that may have manifested. The boss also has this multiple target disease debuff attack that he hasn't placed on the group prior to this. The last attack this boss will use is a fear that will go through your block. This fight is really just a rinse and repeat at this point. Watch out for the boss's mechanics while burning down atronachs as soon as they appear, and try to mitigate the number of atronachs you'll encounter just by flinging poo. Around the perimeter of this large open pit, you'll be facing harvesters and watchers. So just remembering their mechanics from earlier, you should be fine here. However, there are two things to keep in mind in regards to the watchers here. The first is the delayed appearance of adds after their engagement, and the second is their knockback. Make sure you're not between them and the edge of this cliff. If you miss a block and you fall down that cliff, you're going to be running back from the beginning of the dungeon. After making your way around the entire cliff, you'll come to this long hallway. A lot of groups will bum rush this watcher rather than pulling it back. I suggest pulling it back as adds appear down this right hallway. This will ensure that everything is much more bunched up and more easily cleared. The first rule of this fight is to stay out of the water as it is poison. This is another one of those fights that it's easy to get overran unless you're following mechanics. All of these necromancers around the perimeter of this island summon skeletons. While they summon, you can bash them to interrupt the summon. I suggest as the tank to just grab the boss, who is just a glorified watcher, and go around and take care of half the island summons. Just bash them and keep them from getting these skeletons off. During this time, your DPS can be focusing on the other half of the island, both interrupting and burning down the necromancers. As you see, we keep getting knocked back and pushed into this poison water, so save some stamina for sprinting back onto land. After the necromancers are dead, this fight becomes pretty easy. Just watch out for those green beams as they will stun you, and the big knockback. One thing we haven't mentioned are these random poison balls that keep appearing on the land. Everyone that hits you will stun you, so this becomes a battle of stamina. However, if you just simply block before one hits the ground, you're not going to get stunned. If a member does go down and you need to try to get a res off, this can become very problematic, as they're pretty constant and you're just going to get stunned while you're trying to get the res off. The solution to this problem? Bring immovable pots. Pop one, get a res off. In this next hallway, we have the introduction of necrotic horvers. They don't have a ton of HP, but they lay down AoEs on the ground that can be deadly to your group. Alone, these enemies aren't that bad, which is why I can pull 3 of them together here, and it's not that big of a deal as they burn down quickly. However, in a large pool, they can become really difficult to target, and they put down a lot of AoE. So rule of thumb, when you see them, focus them. This fight can become really troubling for some groups. I remember when Wiko and I were new, we spent 3 hours on this boss fight, on normal, and not being able to finish it because we didn't understand the mechanics at the time. The first obvious thing is get rid of those necrotic horvers, as that's a lot of AoE damage that you don't want to be dealing with. For tanks on this fight, you're going to really want to block every attack that he puts out there, as all of the light attacks will stagger you. There's only a few mechanics here that you really must follow, but if you don't follow them, you're not going to clear this fight. The first thing you need to be watching out for is his hands going in the ground. When he does this, everyone needs to move apart from one another. Reason being, you get this big red AoE, and then one person out of the 4 is going to get this poison ring. No one step into the outer lip of this ring, as it is a dot that will kill you in about 2 ticks. During this phase, AoEs will be placed on the ground, which will knock you up after a second of standing in them. You'll also have a bunch of zombies appear, and they'll generally be going after the person in the ring, so help them out with AoEs. Once the boss is active again, you really want to start gravitating towards the outside edge of the room. Reason being, he will go to the center of the room and do a big smash while summoning horvers. Any horver that is already up, plus these new horvers, will do a giant AoE explosion when he smashes the ground. This mechanic can be really difficult, as there is an RNG factor where a Horver might just sprint right towards you, cornering you and making it unavoidable. However, you can really mitigate this chance just by going to the outer edge of the room prior to this attack. If you use these tips, spread out when his hands go in the ground, go to the outer edge before that big explosion, you're really going to greatly increase your chances of finishing this boss. Leading up to the next boss fight, you'll come to this area. Remember the rule of thumb, take out these Horvers. Once everything's dead, you'll have to use these levers in conjunction with one another to open up the next gate. The first thing I want to show is something that a lot of people don't know. If you go stealth, you can actually disarm the traps in this room. The traps themselves don't do a lot of damage or anything, but if you're hit by them, you do get rooted to the ground, which makes it more difficult to escape boss mechanics. There's several different ways to do this fight. I'll explain the reasoning behind my decisions and on why we use the kill order that we do here. First, let's explain each mini-boss individually. Essentially what you have here is a Sorcerer, a Nightblade, a Templar, and a Dragon Knight. While they each have their own mechanics, the things that really stand out in this fight are the fact that the Necromancer can res, so you want to take him out first. The next is the Templar, he's the healer. The method I've found works the best in this fight is really just separation. Have your tank pull the Templar, the Nightblade, and the Dragon Knight all off to one side and just interrupt the heals from the Templar. This allows the DPS to really focus down the Sorcerer, or Necromancer here, in a hurry. At one point the Necro will run off to the side and try to put up a totem. You want to burn down that totem immediately. After the Necromancer goes down, once again use separation. Pull the Nightblade and the DK off to the side. Have your DPS burn down the Templar now. Interrupt the heals as they come. As each of these mini-bosses die, a shadow version of themselves appear. The Shadow Templar doesn't do much of anything, whereas the Necromancer will still be summoning pets. The Nightblade ad is the least threatening, as he just kind of cloaks around and does whirlwind attacks. The DK's most notable attacks are this charge and his Dragon Knight standard that he can place down. This standard will reduce the damage he takes, but you can generally just burn through it. This is the method and kill order that works best for me and my groups, but it doesn't mean that it's the only way to do it. So give it a shot. If it doesn't work out using this method, go ahead and change things up. Change skills, change tactics, just do what's best for your group in the end. As you enter the last boss fight area, make sure to activate hard mode by reading the Lord Warden's tome. The Lord Warden fight has a lot of mechanics and a lot of RNG involved with it, so we'll just explain them as they come here. The first thing you'll notice are these large AoE meteors. They happen throughout the entire fight, they randomly pick their target, they stun, and they only exist here on hard mode. We'll get back to this giant portal on the ground and the purple spheres he's summoning because this channeled attack needs to be blocked. Your healer can heal through this, but it really helps them out if you block or shield this attack. Now let's talk about these portals. Falling into one means you'll be transported to the portal in the ceiling, and you must hit your synergy key to brace for impact on the way down or die when you land. Each of these portals have 2 charges on them. 2 people can fall into them before they disappear. The goal is to avoid these portals until he goes up into the air. Call it out in chat, he's up. He's charging a massive attack, and your only safety is to be falling from the sky. Knowing that these portals only have 2 charges means that you need 2 portals during this phase for your entire party to survive through it. We only had 1 portal. The only reason I survived is because of a set I'm running, Eternal Yokita, which gives me a second chance at life. Our DPS made it into the portal. Wiko here was not so fortunate. Getting a res off here in hard mode is very difficult because of the meteors. I should have popped in a movable pot before attempting this. Notice one of our DPS fell into the portal here. I'm going to purposefully step into this portal in order to close it in hopes that the boss will create a new one prior to his next up in the air attack. Around 65% and 35%, the boss will split into 4 shades of himself. We didn't see the animation because we were in the air, but this is what happened here. During this phase, only 2 out of the 4 shades are going to be damageable. I strongly suggest your DPS and healer work as a group and move from one damageable shade to the next. I also strongly advise that your tank keeps a ranged taunt here and has Absorb Magicka on the bar. Using these two skills as a tank turns this into easy mode. Typically, groups take a lot of pressure during this phase because of these ranged spell projectile attacks. Using the ranged taunt and keeping aggro ensures all of these projectiles will only be hitting you, not your group. Furthermore, using Absorb Magicka ensures that you will be absorbing these spell projectiles. Not only do you not take damage from them, but it actually heals you, making it impossible to die during this phase. When you're down to your last shade, use this as an opportunity to heavy attack for resources or just to build up ultimate for the rest of the fight. Back to these purple spheres now. The only thing they do is damage you and snare you, making it more difficult to escape the portals and the meteors. We've touched on almost all of the mechanics in this fight. Now it's just about applying that knowledge. One last mechanic I want to mention for the tanks is that Lord Warden will do a teleporting strike. He'll disappear and reappear right on top of you. This can be a stun unless you're blocking, so watch out for it. Why do we say this fight is an RNG based fight? There's a couple scenarios here. The first one being, if someone accidentally steps into a portal and you go in the portal behind them in hopes that he'll make a fresh portal before his giant explosion, sometimes he never makes that second portal in time and then half of your group dies. In fact, I've had times in this fight when he goes up for his big attack and there are 0 portals on the ground, effectively wiping the entire group. The other annoying part of this fight is the fact that you can be dropped from the portal in the sky into another portal. This actually happens quite a bit. If it happens, there's no escaping it, it's a death. This fight takes a lot of practice to get used to the mechanics, but the most frustrating thing is you can do everything right and there's still going to be that RNG factor. All we as players can do is do our best to follow the mechanics as close as we can to help mitigate the RNG as much as possible. Just remember to not get frustrated here. You can do everything right and still get screwed by RNG.
Thanks for watching. If you liked what you saw, like, subscribe for any future content from Static. He really appreciates your support. See ya!